December 8th, 1945, Wisconsin, 7:37 in the morning. Dr. William Carter's hands were covered in blood. The baby, a Japanese prisoner's baby, wasn't breathing. His own daughter had just died in childbirth 1,000 miles away. Same morning, same hour, he had to choose. And the choice he made would change everything we thought we knew about enemies and mercy. The surgical knife trembled in his grip, not from fear, from exhaustion, from grief, from the weight of a promise he'd made to a daughter who would never see another sunrise. The operating room was silent except for the desperate sound of Dr. Patterson rubbing a towel against tiny blue skin, stimulating, praying, begging a stranger's baby to breathe. The baby's mother lay open on the table before him. Emiko, 24 years old, enemy of the United States, bleeding internally from a placental rupture that should have killed her 10 minutes ago. Carter's hands moved automatically, suturing layers of tissue, massaging the uterus, fighting death with nothing but skill and stubborn refusal to lose another one. Not today, not this one. 30 seconds of silence that felt like 30 years. Then a gasp, small, fragile, like a whisper from the edge of existence. Another gasp, and then the wail, loud, angry, alive. The most beautiful sound Dr. William Carter had ever heard, because it meant he'd kept his promise. He'd saved the enemy's baby while his own daughter died. And somehow, impossibly, that was exactly what Sarah would have wanted. But to understand how we got here, how an enemy prisoner ended up on that operating table, how an American military doctor came to risk everything for a Japanese baby, we have to go back 3 months, to a train arriving in the frozen plains of Wisconsin, carrying 127 Japanese women, all prisoners of war, and one of them was hiding the most dangerous secret of all. Her name was Emiko, 24 years old, 6 months pregnant, and she was absolutely certain that when the Americans discovered her secret, they would kill her baby. Because that's what she'd been told. That's what every Japanese civilian believed. American soldiers were monsters. They tortured prisoners, killed the weak, showed no mercy. The propaganda had been relentless, graphic, terrifying. Images of American brutality plastered on every wall in Manila. Stories whispered in the dark about what happened to Japanese women who fell into enemy hands. Death would be a mercy compared to what awaited them. But what Emiko discovered in that Wisconsin prison camp was so shocking, so completely opposite to everything she'd been taught, that it would shatter not just her beliefs, but the beliefs of everyone who heard her story. And the most dangerous part, it wasn't American cruelty that broke her. It was American kindness. Because kindness from your enemy means everything you believe was a lie. And lies that deep, that foundational, when they collapse, they take your entire world with them. This is the true story of Emiko and baby Haruka, of Dr. Carter, who saved a life while losing his own daughter, of a young American guard named Danny, whose brother died at Iwo Jima, but who still brought gifts for an enemy's baby. It's a story about the moment when showing mercy becomes more dangerous than showing hate, and what happened when 127 Japanese women learned that their greatest enemy was actually their greatest hope. Now, before we continue with Emiko's story, and I want to ask you something. If you served in the military during or after World War II, if you remember when the war ended, if you or your family ever encountered former enemies who became friends, share your story in the comments below. Your experiences matter. Your generation's wisdom matters. And if this story moves you, and I promise you it will hit that subscribe button, because we're diving deep into 1 hour of the most powerful story you'll hear this year. Stories like this remind us what it truly means to be American. October 1945. The war in the Pacific had just ended. Japan had surrendered after 2 atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The emperor's voice on the radio, scratchy and divine, telling his people that the war situation had developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Translation: they had lost everything. Millions of Japanese soldiers and civilians were now prisoners of war, scattered across Asia and the Pacific. Most expected death. Some wanted it. Death with honor was preferable to the shame of surrender. That's what they'd been taught. That's what the military code demanded. But a small group, 127 women, mostly civilians caught in the Philippines when Manila fell, were being transported to a place they'd never heard of. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, the frozen heart of America. Under the Geneva Convention, America was required to treat prisoners humanely. But humanely could mean a lot of things. Hot meals, warm beds, medical care. Nobody knew, especially not the Japanese women on that train. They'd been traveling for 6 days, first on a prison ship from Manila to San Francisco cramped in cargo holds that smelled of rust and fear and vomit. Then on this train that carried them deeper and deeper into enemy territory. With each mile, their fear grew. They were being taken inland, away from the coast, away from any hope of rescue, away from witnesses. The train car was cold. Their breath came out in white clouds. Most of the women wore thin cotton dresses issued to them in San Francisco, completely inadequate for Wisconsin's autumn chill. They shivered violently, teeth chattering, lips turning blue, but no one complained. Complaining was dangerous. Weakness was dangerous. Everything was dangerous now. Emiko sat in the middle of the group, always in the middle. Her friends Hanako, Miyuki, Tomoko, and Keiko formed a protective wall around her. Hanako, 32, had been a nurse in Osaka. She walked directly in front, occasionally glancing back, with eyes full of practiced assessment and growing worry. Miyuki, 28, a former teacher, walked beside Emiko, her hand occasionally brushing against Emiko's arm in silent solidarity. Tomoko, 26, and married her husband, a prisoner somewhere in the Philippines, walked behind close enough that her body blocked any view of Emiko's profile. And Keiko, 30, a seamstress with clever hands, had spent the last 3 months creating layers of loose clothing to disguise what was becoming impossible to hide. For 3 months, they'd been hiding Emiko's pregnancy. On the prison ship, they'd surrounded her during inspections, dressed her in Keiko's carefully constructed loose garments, told her to hunch over, to stay in shadows, to move like an old woman bent by hardship. When she had morning sickness, they covered the sounds with coughing. When her belly started to show, they wrapped her in extra layers and positioned themselves strategically, a human shield of loyalty and desperation. But now as the train doors opened and cold Wisconsin air rushed in, Emiko knew the hiding was almost over. They would have medical examinations. They always did. And this time there would be nowhere to hide. Through frost-covered windows, they could see their destination. Camp McCoy stretched out before them like something from a nightmare. Rows of identical wooden barracks painted dull gray. Watchtowers rising against the pale sky like skeletal fingers. Barbed wire fences surrounding everything glinting with ice in the weak October sun. Armed guards walking the perimeter with rifles slung over their shoulders, breath visible in the frigid air. This was a prison. This was where they would die. The train lurched to a stop. The screech of brakes on frozen rails echoed across empty plains, sharp and final. Like a door slamming shut on any hope of escape, American soldiers appeared at the train doors, their voices loud and commanding in English, a language that sounded harsh to Japanese ears. All hard consonants and strange rhythms. Move out, single file. No talking. A translator appeared. Sergeant Rodriguez, Japanese-American, Nisei, second generation. His face was American, but his words were Japanese. His accent was strange, though, shaped by American vowels and California sunshine. He sounded like home and like enemy at the same time. He repeated the orders in their language. His voice was cold, but his eyes, Hanako noticed, held something else. Something that might have been sympathy or pity. She wasn't sure which was worse. The women stood on stiff legs and began to shuffle toward the exit. 6 days of sitting had made their bodies weak. The smell hit them as they stepped onto the platform. Pine trees, wood smoke, something cooking in the distance that made their empty stomachs twist with hunger and longing. The air was sharp and clean, so different from the stale, crowded air of ship and train. Hanako inhaled deeply and for a moment thought of the mountains near her childhood home. Then she remembered where she was and felt ashamed for finding anything beautiful in this place of captivity. They were lined up on the platform, counted like livestock, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 127. Then marched toward a large brick building near the camp entrance. Their feet crunched on frozen grass. The sound of their walking was loud in the morning silence. Guards flanked them on both sides, not pointing rifles at them, but holding them ready. The women kept their eyes down, shoulders hunched against cold and fear and the weight of surrender. Emiko walked in the middle of the group, surrounded by her protectors. Yumiko walked directly behind her, close enough to hide Emiko's profile from the guards' sightlines. Tomoko walked beside her carrying an extra blanket that she periodically draped over Emiko's shoulders, obscuring her shape beneath the layers. Hanako walked in front, occasionally glancing back, medical instincts on high alert, watching for any sign of distress. They all knew what was coming. They talked about it in whispers during the long train ride. Medical examinations. The Americans would check them for diseases, for lice, for anything that might spread through the camp. They would have to undress. They would have to be examined, and when they examined Emiko, they would discover the pregnancy. And then what the women had heard terrible stories about what happened to pregnant prisoners. Some said the Americans would force her to give birth alone in a cell and then take the baby away to an orphanage. Others said they would do something worse, something to end the pregnancy entirely with drugs or crude instruments. A few whispered that pregnant prisoners were simply executed because they were too much trouble to deal with, too much of a drain on resources. No one knew which stories were true, but they all agreed that discovery would mean disaster. As they approached the brick building, a sign above the door read, "Camp Hospital" in white letters. Through the windows, they could see nurses in crisp white uniforms moving around inside with professional efficiency. The women's pace slowed. Some were crying softly now. Others prayed under their breath. Traditional prayers to Buddha, to ancestors, to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, to anyone who might be listening in this foreign land. Emiko felt her baby kick inside her, a small flutter against her ribs. She placed her hand over her belly, trying to send a silent message through skin and muscle and fluid. Stay quiet. Stay still. Let us survive this. The doors opened. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of antiseptic and soap. Clean, clinical, terrifying in its efficiency. An American officer stood inside, clipboard in hand, checking off names and numbers. Behind him, a doctor in a white coat. The doctor was older, maybe 52, gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the light. He looked tired, deep lines around his eyes. But he looked kind, too, gentle somehow. But Emiko knew better than to trust appearances. The enemy could smile even as they destroyed you. She'd seen it before. Smiling American pilots dropping bombs that turned Manila into hell. "Welcome to Camp McCoy," the translator Rodriguez said, though the English words had been falling like stones. The translation was always softer than the original command, as if Rodriguez was trying to cushion them from the full force of their captivity, trying to maintain some shred of humanity in the process. "You will undergo medical examination. This is required by international law for all prisoners of war. Please cooperate fully." Hanako stepped forward, her nurse's instincts overriding fear. "What kind of examination?" she asked in broken English. One of the few women who had studied the language before the war, back when Japan and America were still trading partners. Her accent was thick, but her meaning clear. The American doctor looked at her and smiled. It was a genuine smile, she thought. Not cruel or mocking, just tired and maybe a little sad. The smile of someone who'd seen too much war. "Basic health checks," he said, slowly, speaking to her as if she were a child, or someone who couldn't fully understand, which technically she couldn't. Not completely. "Height, weight, temperature, blood pressure. Check for tuberculosis, malaria, parasites. We need to make sure everyone is healthy." Rodriguez repeated this in Japanese, his California accent, making the words sound strange and foreign, even in their own language. The women looked at each other. Height and weight. That meant they would see Emiko's body clearly. Blood pressure meant they would touch her, feel her belly, notice the firmness of pregnancy. There was no way to hide it now. Tomoko squeezed Emiko's hand. "We stay with you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, we stay with you." But even as she said it, they all knew that staying together wouldn't be enough. The truth was about to be revealed. And then everything would change. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd hidden, all the careful positioning and loose clothing and covered sounds, all of it was about to end. The examination room was large and bright. White tile floors that reflected harsh overhead lights, making everything seem overexposed and clinical. 20 metal examination tables lined the walls, separated by thin white curtains that offered the illusion of privacy, but provided none. The curtains were so thin, you could see shadows moving behind them. The women were divided into groups of 5 and directed to different sections of the room. Emiko's group included her closest friends, Hanako Miyuki, Tomoko Keiko, and Yumiko. They had orchestrated this carefully on the train. trading positions with other women, making promises and bargains, making sure they would stay together. Now they stood in a tight cluster around Emiko, trying to shield her for just a few more minutes before the inevitable. Please remove your outer clothing and stand by the examination tables, a female nurse instructed through Rodriguez. She was in her early 30s. 34 to be exact, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and a face that was professional. Neither kind nor cruel. Just efficient. Her name tag read Sullivan. Nurse M. Sullivan. The women began to undress slowly, fingers fumbling with buttons and ties. The warmth of the room, so welcome after the cold outside, now felt suffocating, like the air was too thick to breathe. Emiko's hands shook as she removed her outer dress, revealing the loose undershirt she wore beneath. It was made of thin cotton, intentionally baggy, sewn by Keiko, with extra fabric panels, and it hung over her belly in a way that might hide her pregnancy if no one looked too closely. If they were very lucky. If the gods were merciful. But someone was looking closely. Nurse Sullivan had paused in her work with another group. She was watching Emiko with a frown. Professional assessment, years of experience reading bodies. Her eyes traveled from Emiko's face down to her midsection and then back up again. Emiko saw the exact moment when Nurse Sullivan realized what she was seeing. The woman's eyes widened, her lips parted slightly in surprise. She set down her clipboard with a soft click and walked toward them with purposeful strides, medical training overriding everything else. "Wait," Hanako said in English, stepping between the nurse and Emiko. Her voice was urgent, desperate. "Please wait." "Step aside," Nurse Sullivan said. Not unkindly but firmly, the voice of someone used to being obeyed in medical settings. "I need to examine her." "She is fine," Hanako insisted, her English breaking down under stress, grammar collapsing. "She is healthy, no sick, no problem. Ma'am, I need you to step aside." The nurse's voice was louder now, attracting attention from across the room. Other nurses paused in their work. A male doctor at the far end of the room looked up from his clipboard and started walking toward them. His name badge read Dr. Patterson. Red hair, freckles, young, maybe late 20s. Intern, perhaps. Miyuki and Tomoko moved closer to Emiko, forming a tighter circle. It was instinctive, protective, completely futile, like trying to stop a flood with bare hands. But they did it anyway, because that's what you do when you love someone. You stand between them and danger even when you know it won't help, even when you know you'll fail. Nurse Sullivan raised her hand and beckoned to another approaching figure. "Dr. Morrison, I need you here." But the man who approached wasn't Dr. Morrison. It was the gray-haired doctor from the entrance, the one with kind, tired eyes and that gentle smile. "Dr. William Carter, what's the problem?" He asked the nurse, though his eyes were on the cluster of Japanese women who looked like they were preparing for battle, shoulders squared, faces set with determination. "I think this one might be pregnant," Sullivan said quietly, lowering her voice to something like respect. But in the silent room, everyone heard. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Pregnant. The other women in the room turned to look, some curious, some shocked. The American staff members exchanged glances, wordless communication passing between them, and Emiko's friends tightened their circle faces, set with determination and terror and love. Dr. Carter stepped forward. His movements were slow, deliberate, non-threatening, like someone approaching a frightened animal. "Ladies," he said through Rodriguez, who had rushed over sensing crisis, "I need to examine her. It's important for her health and the baby's health. We can't help if we don't know what's going on." Hanako understood enough to grasp the meaning, the essential core of what he was saying. "You take baby?" she asked, her voice breaking on the last word. "You hurt baby?" Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose in surprise, genuine surprise. Not the surprise of being caught, but the surprise of being misunderstood. Then his face softened with understanding, with something that looked like pain at the thought. "No," he said slowly and clearly, waiting for Rodriguez to translate each word. "No, we protect baby. We help, I promise." But promises from the enemy meant nothing. They had been promised safety before and found only bombs. They had been promised honor and found only defeat and surrender and shame. They had been promised that the emperor was divine and that Japan would never lose, and look where that had gotten them. Why would this promise be any different? Tomoko began to cry, Miyuki was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Keiko had her arms around Emiko's shoulders, holding on as if she could physically prevent what was about to happen, as if love alone could be a shield. And Emiko, silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Let him see," she said in Japanese. "There's nowhere left to hide." Her friends looked at her in anguish, in protest, but they knew she was right. Slowly, reluctantly, like petals falling from a dying flower, they stepped back. Emiko stood alone, vulnerable, her hand pressed protectively against her belly where her child grew. Dr. Carter approached gently, still slow, still careful. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her belly. Emiko didn't understand the English words, but she understood the gesture. The asking, the waiting for permission. She nodded once. He lifted the edge of her undershirt, and there was no hiding it anymore. Her belly was round and full, unmistakably pregnant. 6 months at least. The baby kicked, visible even from the outside. A small movement under the skin, and Dr. Carter's face broke into a smile. "Well," he said softly, "hello there, little one." What happened next was not what any of the women expected. Dr. Carter didn't call for guards. He didn't shout orders. He didn't reach for instruments or syringes. He didn't grab Emiko's arm or mark her file with red ink. Instead, he turned to Nurse Sullivan and said, "Get her a chair and a blanket. She shouldn't be standing this long." Sullivan hurried away and returned moments later with a wooden chair and a thick wool blanket. "Army issue. Warm." Dr. Carter gestured for Emiko to sit. When she hesitated, confused by the kindness, he said through Rodriguez, "Please, you need to take care of yourself. When is the baby due?" Emiko stared at him. She didn't answer. She couldn't process what was happening. He was asking when the baby was due, as if this were a normal situation, as if she were a patient at a regular hospital instead of an enemy prisoner about to be punished for the crime of reproduction. "How many months?" Dr. Carter tried again, holding up fingers. 4, 5, 6. Hanako, still standing protectively nearby, held up 6 fingers. 6 months, she said. 6 months, Dr. Carter repeated, making a note on his clipboard with a pencil. "Okay, that means we have about 3 months to prepare." He pointed to Hanako. "Are you a nurse?" Hanako blinked, surprised to be addressed directly. "Yes, I was nurse in Osaka." Good, Carter said, his professional demeanor taking over completely now. "You'll help me monitor her pregnancy. I need to know immediately if there are any problems. Bleeding, severe pain, anything unusual." He was speaking faster now, slipping back into his normal pace, the pace of a busy doctor with patients to see and work to do. Rodriguez was struggling to keep up with the translations, stumbling over medical terms. Another American doctor had joined them, the young red-haired one, Dr. Patterson. "Is she really pregnant?" he asked her, Carter, voice full of disbelief. "About 6 months along," Carter confirmed without looking up from his notes. "Looks healthy, but we need to do a proper examination. Get her file ready. We'll need to track her nutrition carefully. She'll need extra rations, vitamin supplements, regular checkups." Dr. Patterson looked confused, like someone who'd walked into the wrong room. "Do we have protocols for this? I mean, for a pregnant POW?" "We'll follow the same protocols we'd use for any pregnant woman," Dr. Carter said firmly. "She's entitled to proper medical care under the Geneva Convention." "Get it set up." The women watching this exchange couldn't follow all the English words, but they understood the tone. The American doctors weren't angry. They weren't threatening. They were acting like doctors, talking about vitamins and checkups and making sure the baby was healthy, acting like Emiko's life mattered, like the baby's life mattered. Tomoko grabbed Rodriguez's arm with desperate urgency. "What are they saying? Are they taking the baby? Are they hurting her?" Rodriguez, looking overwhelmed by everything happening, shook his head. "No, they're saying they will take care of her, give her extra food, make sure the baby is healthy." "Why?" Miyuki demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion born of too many betrayals. "Why would they do that? We're prisoners. We're enemies." Rodriguez hesitated, searching for words, because he said slowly, "That's what doctors do. They take care of people, even enemies." But this made no sense to the women. In their experience, enemies didn't take care of each other. The Japanese military had not taken care of its prisoners. The stories that had filtered back from POW camps in Burma, the Philippines, China, were nightmares of starvation, disease, deliberate cruelty. Men beaten for being sick. Men worked to death building railways. Men denied medicine and left to die in agony. That's what happened to prisoners. That's what they expected to happen to them. That's what they'd been preparing for. Dr. Carter was speaking again, this time directly to Amico through Rodriguez. I need to examine you properly. Check the baby's heartbeat. Measure your belly. Make sure everything is developing normally. It won't hurt, I promise. But I need your permission. Will you let me help you? Permission? He was asking permission. An American doctor was asking a Japanese prisoner for permission to help her. Emiko looked at her friends. Hanako gave a small nod. Trust him. Miyuki was still crying, but she nodded too. Tomoko and Keiko held hands, their faces reflecting the same confusion and cautious hope that Emiko felt. This impossible situation where the enemy was offering help instead of harm. Yes, Emiko said quietly, you can help. And so began the strangest and most uncomfortable truth these women had ever faced. The enemy was going to take care of them. Retry T, Tiep Tuk Cho Part 2. Orchestrated narrative revisions addressing dialogue pacing and scene expansion. User Mon Part 2 Duk Viet Lai với tất cả các fixes đã đề xuất fixes for Part 2. Mom. That's what doctors do. Taiteo Don Rodriguez nói he. Reduce food guilt repetition. Rutgon multi scenes 3. Baby didn't start the war phrases. 4. Expand Tomoko's letter scene 300 words full dramatic version 5. Add clarification v Red Cross hearing scheduled but will be postponed. Improve transitions. Let me write Part 2 with kak improvements nay. The Enemy's Baby Part 2 revised. Dr. Carter conducted the examination with professional care. He measured Emiko's belly with a cloth tape measure, explaining each step through Rodriguez. 32 centimeters from pubic bone to top of fundus, consistent with 6 months gestation. He listened to the baby's heartbeat with a stethoscope, the metal disc cold against Emiko's skin. His face broke into another smile when he heard the strong, rapid rhythm. 140 beats per minute. Healthy, he announced. Very healthy. Strong heartbeat. He checked Emiko's blood pressure, looked at her ankles for swelling, asked questions about her diet, her symptoms, whether she'd had any bleeding or pain. Hanako, using her nursing knowledge and broken English, helped translate the more technical questions. The medical terms came easier to her than conversational language. Edema, nausea, fetal movement. Her diet has been very poor, Hanako finally admitted. On the ship, very little food. Rice, sometimes fish, not enough. She is always hungry. Dr. Carter's expression darkened. That needs to change immediately. She needs protein, vegetables, dairy. Growing a baby takes a lot of resources. He made more notes on his clipboard. I'm prescribing daily vitamin supplements and extra meal portions. She should eat 4 times a day, if possible, and plenty of water. He stood up and looked at the group of women who had remained clustered around Emiko throughout the entire examination. You all care about her very much, he observed. That's good. She needs support. Pregnancy can be difficult, especially under these circumstances. Circumstances? Hanako repeated, unsure of the word. This situation, Rodriguez clarified. Being a prisoner, being far from home. It's stressful. Will the baby be taken away? A new voice asked suddenly. It was Keiko, the seamstress, asking the question that had been haunting all of them. When it's born, will you take it? Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, but relayed the question to Dr. Carter. The doctor's face grew serious. I don't know what will happen after the birth, he admitted. That's not my decision to make. But while she's here, while she's under my care, I will do everything I can to make sure both mother and baby are healthy and safe. That's my job. That's what I'm trained to do. It was an honest answer, which somehow made it worse. He couldn't promise that Emiko could keep her baby. He couldn't promise anything about the future. But he could promise care in the present. And strange as it was, they found themselves believing him. After the examination, Emiko was given a separate bunk in a corner of the barracks, chosen specifically because it was away from drafts and close to the wood stove where heat pooled. She was given 2 extra blankets and a pillow, luxuries that the other women didn't have. She was given a package of vitamins, small brown pills in a white bottle, and instructions to take one every morning with food. That evening, during their first meal in the camp mess hall, Emiko's tray had portions noticeably larger than everyone else's. Extra meat, a thick slice of meatloaf, an extra roll still warm, a bowl of milk instead of just water. The other prisoners stared, some with envy wondering why she deserved more, others with confusion trying to understand the logic. Why are they feeding her so much? One woman whispered. Because she's pregnant, another replied. Because they want the baby healthy, but why? Why do they care about a Japanese baby? No one had an answer. It defied everything they knew about war, about enemies, about how prisoners were treated. In the Japan they came from, resources were scarce, and only the valuable received extra. A pregnant prisoner was a burden, not someone deserving of care. But here in this American prison camp, their pregnant friend was being given extra food, extra blankets, regular medical attention. She was being treated like someone whose life mattered, like someone worth protecting. That night in the darkness of the barracks, the women gathered around Emiko's bunk and spoke in whispers. The wood stove crackled. Outside, wind howled across the frozen plains. I don't understand, Miyuki said. Are they being kind because they're good people, or is there some other reason? Does it matter, Tomoko replied. She's getting help. The baby has a chance. Isn't that what we wanted? Yes, Hanako said quietly. But accepting their help feels like betrayal, like we're accepting that they're right and we're wrong, like we're admitting defeat not just in war but in everything we believed. And there it was. The real terror wasn't that the Americans would be cruel. The real terror was that they were being kind. And kindness from the enemy meant that everything they had been taught was a lie. If Americans weren't monsters, then what had the war been for? What had all the death and suffering accomplished? Within a week, Emiko's pregnancy had become an open fact throughout the camp. The American guards knew. The other prisoners knew. Even the camp commander, Colonel Robert Harrison, knew. And astonishingly, no one punished her for it. No one even seemed to think it was particularly unusual or problematic. It was simply accepted, documented, accommodated. Every morning at 7 after breakfast, Emiko reported to the camp hospital. Dr. Carter or Nurse Sullivan would check her vital signs, measure her belly's growth, ask about any discomfort. Hanako always accompanied her, both as translator and as medical consultant. Carter had started teaching Hanako more advanced English medical terms: prenatal, gestational, trimester. She soaked up the knowledge like water after a drought filling notebooks with new vocabulary. The daily routine had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Wake at 6:30, breakfast at 7, Emiko's medical checkup at 7:30, then work assignments, though Emiko's were light. Folding laundry in the warm laundry room where steam rose from industrial washers. Sorting supplies in the warehouse where the work was calm and methodical. Tasks that didn't require heavy lifting or long periods of standing. The other women had regular work assignments too. Kitchen duty, laundry cleaning, barracks general maintenance. Some with education worked as translators or helped American soldiers learn basic Japanese phrases for their eventual occupation duty. The work was steady but not exhausting. And they were paid in camp script that could be used at the canteen. The canteen was a revelation. It sold chocolate bars, cigarette soap, writing paper, even small personal items like combs and ribbons. The women would stand in front of the candy display, marveling that they could buy sugar while pregnant women in Japan were starving. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Emiko used her script to buy extra chocolate and share it with her friends. The doctor says the baby needs sugar for energy, she explained, though they all knew she just wanted to share the small luxury to ease her guilt by spreading the wealth. They would sit in the barracks in the evening, slowly eating their chocolate, trying not to think about families back home who had nothing. Letters arrived sporadically, always censored with black marks where military censors had removed sensitive information. Miyuki received a letter from her mother describing the food shortages in Tokyo. Rice rations cut again to barely a cup per person per day. No vegetables, no meat. People eating tree bark and grass to survive. Miyuki read the letter once, then hid it in her trunk. She couldn't bear to read it again while eating 3 meals a day in an American prison camp. Meals had become the central paradox of their existence. 3 times a day, they sat at long tables in the mess hall and ate food better than what most Japanese civilians had seen in years. Meat, vegetables, bread, butter, milk, fruit. The variety was staggering. One morning they had scrambled eggs with ham toast with jam and fresh orange juice. Orange juice. When was the last time any of them had tasted an orange? Emiko was given even larger portions, following Dr. Carter's orders. She ate dutifully, knowing she needed the nutrition for the baby. But the guilt never left. Every vitamin strengthened her child, while children across the ocean starved. Every meal was a reminder of the vast inequality of their situations. Don't think about it, Hanako advised. Just eat, just survive. That's all we can do. But it was impossible not to think about it. Survival had always been the goal. But survival at what cost? Survival while accepting the enemy's generosity. Survival while growing comfortable in captivity. The debates in the barracks became more honest and more painful. The women had stopped pretending that their treatment was normal or that they understood it. Now they were wrestling with what it meant for their identity, their loyalty, their future. I feel like I'm betraying everyone back home. One woman named Sachiko admitted one night, "My parents are starving in Osaka. My little sister died last year because there was no medicine. And here I am, healthy and fed, being cared for by the people who bombed our cities." But you didn't choose to be here, Hanako pointed out. You didn't ask for this treatment. It's being given to you because of their beliefs, not because you deserve it less than the people suffering at home. That's the point, though, Miyuki said. They believe everyone deserves it. That's what Dr. Carter told me yesterday when I was helping translate. He said every human being deserves basic care and dignity, regardless of what country they're from or what they've done. That's not how we were raised to think. Because we were raised to value the collective over the individual, Tomoko added. The group matters more than the person. The nation matters more than the citizen. But here they act like each person matters individually. Like Emiko matters as Emiko, not as a Japanese prisoner or a tool for the state. And you think that's better? A harsh voice challenged. It was Fumiko, 35 years old, military family. Her father had been a colonel. Her brother had died at Saipan, killed in the final bonsai charge. She sat on the opposite side of the barracks, arms crossed, face hard. This individualism, this selfishness, that's what makes them weak. That's what makes them soft. They won the war, Miyuki said quietly. They dropped atomic bombs that ended the fighting in minutes. They built weapons and planes and ships that overwhelmed us completely. Does that seem soft to you? Fumiko had no response. The evidence was undeniable. America had crushed Japan militarily while simultaneously maintaining enough resources and organization to treat prisoners well. They had the strength to destroy and the discipline to show mercy. That combination was more frightening than simple cruelty would have been. It was in the fourth week that the first real crisis came. Emiko stopped eating. She pushed away her breakfast tray, the scrambled eggs congealing, the bacon growing cold, the toast untouched. Hanako noticed immediately. "Emiko, you must eat. The baby needs food." "I can't," Emiko whispered. Her voice was hollow, empty. She was holding a letter, her mother's letter. Hanako could see the careful handwriting, even from across the table the characters formed, with a shaking hand. "What does it say?" Emiko's hands shook. "My sister, she's 10 years old. She's sick, dying, no medicine available. My mother writes that they're eating 1 cup of rice per day, for the whole family." She looked up at Hanako with tears streaming down her face. "How can I eat steak while my baby sister starves?" She refused lunch, refused the afternoon snack. By dinner, Dr. Carter had been called. He sat across from Emiko in the hospital office. Rodriguez translated, his young face troubled by the moral weight of the conversation. "You must eat," Carter said gently. "The baby needs nutrition." "My sister is 10, Emiko said through tears. "She's dying. How can I eat while she starves?" Dr. Carter was silent for a long moment. "I'm so sorry about your sister, I truly am. But starving yourself won't save her. It will only kill your baby." "Maybe that's justice," Emiko said quietly. "Justice," Carter repeated. He looked at her with such profound sadness that Emiko felt something crack inside her chest. Justice would be no war. Justice would be your sister healthy and your baby born in peace. Justice would be me never having to choose between patients because we're all on the same side. But this isn't justice. This is just survival. And your baby deserves to survive. Hanako sat with Emiko all night, talking, arguing, pleading. This child bears no responsibility for what happened. Hanako said, innocence deserves protection always. Your sister would want this baby to live. By morning, Emiko ate, but the guilt never left. It was there in every bite, every vitamin, every checkup that confirmed the baby was growing strong. The women's understanding began to shift through small moments, through unexpected encounters that chipped away at their beliefs. There was Private Danny O'Brien, 19 years old, baby-faced, from Boston. He worked the day shift as a guard, walking the perimeter, checking passes, doing the mundane work of military life. But he'd started bringing small gifts, an extra apple from the mess, a sweet roll, a pair of warm socks. Always for Emiko, always with the same broken Japanese phrase for baby. Miyuki, who'd been teaching some of the guards basic Japanese, started talking to Danny during her shifts at the library. She learned his story. His older brother had been killed at Iwo Jima, died on the beach in the first wave. Danny had lied about his age to enlist at 17. Wanted to make his brother proud. Wanted to finish what his brother had started. His mother was a Gold Star mother, a woman who'd lost a son in service. Danny carried her photo in his wallet. A stern-faced Irish woman in a black dress. Mourning. Forever mourning. Why do you help Emiko? Miyuki asked him one day. Your brother died fighting Japanese soldiers. Why do you care about a Japanese baby? Danny looked confused by the question, as if the answer was obvious. Because it's a baby, he said simply. Babies didn't kill my brother. The war killed my brother. Babies are just babies. He paused, struggling with the English, knowing Miyuki's understanding was limited. My brother, he continued slowly. His wife was pregnant when he died. He never met his son, never held him. I think about that a lot. How my nephew grew up without a father. How unfair that was. He looked toward the barracks where Emiko was resting. That baby in there, he said, her father is dead too, right? Rodriguez told me. Killed in Manila. So that baby is like my nephew, growing up without a father because of war. And I just thought if I can make it a little easier, if I can bring a few gifts, maybe that makes up for something. I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to prove that not all Americans are what your propaganda said we were. Miyuki translated this conversation to the others that night. They sat in silence, processing it. An American boy whose brother died at Iwo Jima bringing gifts for a Japanese baby. Because he understood loss. Because he saw past nationality to human suffering. It was becoming harder to maintain hatred. There was Nurse Margaret Sullivan too, 34 years old, 3 children of her own back home in Michigan. She'd started teaching Emiko prenatal exercises, breathing techniques for labor, how to massage swollen feet when the ankles puffed with a retained fluid. She brought a bottle of lotion for Emiko's stretching skin, personal items, things that cost money, given freely to a prisoner. One afternoon, Margaret brought her personal photo album to show Emiko, pictures of her own pregnancies, her children as babies. This is what motherhood looks like, she said through Rodriguez, pointing to a photo of herself, looking exhausted and happy, holding a newborn with dark circles under her eyes and a radiant smile. Messy, exhausting, perfect. She pointed to her own pregnant belly in one photo. That was my third. I was scared too. Scared something would go wrong. Scared I wouldn't be a good mother. But fear is normal. Fear means you care. Emiko asked through Hanako. You don't hate me for being Japanese. Margaret looked genuinely surprised. Hate you? You're just a scared young woman having a baby. That's not political. That's human. I hate the war. I hate what it's done to all of us. But you're a patient who needs help. And I'm a nurse, that's all that matters. These moments accumulated, built on each other, created a weight of evidence that contradicted everything the women had been taught. But it was the arrival of Tomoko's package that truly shattered the last walls of resistance. It came in week 6, Red Cross delivery, official stamp. Tomoko's hands shook as she opened it. Inside her husband's wedding ring. Tarnished, bent, a death certificate with official stamps and signatures. And a letter. Not the censored kind with black marks, a smuggled letter, written in his final days by a hand that could barely hold a pen. That night she gathered the women. Her voice was breaking as she began to read. Tomoko, if you are reading this, I am gone. I need you to know the truth about how we are treated here. The American guards are not the monsters we were told. They give us their own rations sometimes. Try to get us medicine when they can. There is a sergeant named Murphy who shares photographs of his wife, asks about you, treats us like human beings. But the Japanese guards, the ones assigned by Tokyo to maintain order among us prisoners, they are brutal beyond words. They beat us for asking for food. Ishu-san, call us traitors for surrendering. Say we disgraced Japan by living when we should have died. Yesterday, they beat a man to death for being too sick to work. His name was Tanaka. He had a daughter. The Americans tried to intervene, tried to stop it. Our own guards refused their help, told them to mind their own business. We are being punished by our own people for the crime of surviving, for not having the honor to die. Tomoko's voice cracked. She paused, continued. Tomoko, if you are safe with the Americans, stay safe. Don't come back if you can avoid it. They will punish you too for surrendering, for living when you should have died. The enemy isn't always who they tell you it is. Sometimes the enemy wears the same uniform as you. I love you. I'm sorry I won't meet you again, but I'm grateful you lived. Living is not shameful. They lied to us about that. They lied to us about everything. Your husband Hiroshi. October 28, 1945. The silence after Tomoko finished reading was absolute. Even Fumiko had no response, no defense, no argument. The evidence was too clear, too damning. Their own people had killed this man. Not through combat, through cruelty toward their own, through enforcement of a twisted code of honor that valued death over life. Hanako spoke first. How many others, she asked quietly. How many other prisoners are being beaten by our own guards while Americans try to help them and no one answered? Because they all knew the stories had been filtering through, whispers, rumors. But this was proof, written testimony from a dying man. Fumiko stood abruptly, left the barracks without a word. They found her later sitting outside in the cold crying. It was the week before Thanksgiving when Dr. Carter discovered the complication. During a routine checkup, he palpated Emiko's belly, frowned, checked again, called Margaret over. Feel this, he said. Top of fundus. That's the head. Margaret pressed gently her experienced hands, confirming what Carter suspected. Baby's breech, she said. Through Rodriguez, they explained to Emiko. The baby is sitting wrong, bottom down instead of head first. Many babies turn on their own before delivery. We have time. But if it doesn't turn, delivery will be very difficult. Possibly dangerous. Emiko's hand went to her belly. Dangerous. It can be. Carter admitted, but we're monitoring closely. We'll do everything we can. Everything they could do, however, was limited by policy. Dr. Carter approached Camp Commander Colonel Robert Harrison the next day, a career military officer, 48 years old. By the book. Not cruel, but not sympathetic either. He viewed POWs as an administrative burden. Problems to be managed. Sir Carter said, I have a pregnant prisoner with a breech presentation. If the baby doesn't turn naturally, I may need to perform an external cephalic version. Harrison looked up from his paperwork. What's that A procedure to manually turn the baby from outside, through the mother's abdomen? Applying pressure to manipulate the fetus into proper position. Sounds risky. There's some risk, Carter admitted. But without it, she could die in labor. The baby, too. Breech deliveries have high mortality rates. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Dr. Carter, we're not authorized to perform risky procedures on enemy prisoners. Geneva Convention requires adequate care, not experimental medicine. It's not experimental, Carter argued. It's standard obstetric practice. For American women, maybe. But these are POWs. If something goes wrong, if she dies during your procedure, that's an international incident. My answer is no. But sir, if she dies in childbirth because we didn't try, then she dies, Harrison said flatly. That's war, doctor. The war is over, Carter said. Not officially. Peace treaty hasn't been signed. These women are still enemy combatants as far as Washington is concerned. You provide basic care. Nothing risky. That's an order. Dr. Carter left the meeting furious, but there was nothing he could do. He was military. Harrison was his commanding officer. Orders were orders, even orders that meant a patient might die. He told Emiko the truth. If the baby doesn't turn on its own, delivery will be very dangerous. I want to try a procedure to turn it, but I've been forbidden. I'm sorry. Emiko nodded, understanding without understanding. Acceptance without accepting. The baby kicked against her ribs as if in protest. It was Fumiko who made everything worse. She'd been watching the special treatment Emiko received. The extra food, the medical care, the American guards bringing gifts. And something inside her couldn't accept it, couldn't reconcile it with her understanding of honor, of duty, of what it meant to be Japanese. Despite Tomoko's letter, despite the evidence of American mercy, she clung to the old beliefs because letting go meant admitting her brother died for lies. She wrote a letter, in secret, to the International Committee of the Red Cross, explaining that a pregnant Japanese prisoner was being used for propaganda purposes, that Dr. Carter was showing inappropriate favoritism, that Emiko should be transferred to a different facility or repatriated immediately for her own protection. She submitted it through official channels. POWs had the right to write to the Red Cross. The letters were supposed to be uncensored. Protected communication. Miyuki found the draft 2 weeks later while Fumiko was at work, hidden under a false bottom in her trunk. She showed it to Hanako, then to the others. The confrontation that night was brutal. You tried to have Emiko taken away, Hanako said, voice shaking with rage. The baby could die. Emiko could die. You could have killed them both. I'm trying to protect us, Fumiko shot back. Protect Japan's honor. You've all been seduced by their comfort. You've forgotten who you are. Who we are, Tomoko screamed, is prisoners being treated better than our own soldiers treated us. My husband died because of your honor, beaten by Japanese guards. Your honor is poison. Emiko spoke quietly, but everyone heard. This child bears no guilt for the war. Your concept of honor would kill an innocent. That's not honor. That's murder. Fumiko left the barracks, slept outside in the cold, self-punishment, self-exile. But the damage was done. The Red Cross responded within 2 weeks. Sent an investigator. Mr. Heinrich Weber, Swiss, neutral, professional. He arrived in early December, clipboard in hand, ready to investigate allegations of improper treatment. He interviewed Dr. Carter, interviewed Emiko, interviewed all the women. Colonel Harrison saw an opportunity. Prove Carter was overstepping. Get him removed. End this messy situation. Return to normal protocols. The hearing was scheduled for December 8th. Weber planned 3 days of interviews, detailed examination of medical records, assessment of camp conditions. But none of them knew that December 8th would bring something far more urgent than bureaucratic proceedings. The weight of it all hung over the camp like winter snow, heavy, suffocating, inevitable. The baby was still breech. Dr. Carter was forbidden from helping. Fumiko had betrayed them. The Red Cross was investigating. And somewhere in Michigan, Dr. Carter's daughter was getting sicker. Pre-eclampsia worsening, blood pressure climbing, the baby in distress. Everything was converging toward December 8th, toward the morning when all the threads would pull tight, when Dr. Carter would have to choose, when Emiko would face death, when a baby would either take her first breath or never breathe at all. And in her bunk, Emiko felt her baby kick. Strong, live, demanding to be born into a world that didn't want her, but wanted her anyway. Retry T, Vasuatipcho Part 3. Orchestrated comprehensive revisions addressing character arcs and narrative clarity. Ngayong Munto Vietlai Part 3 Vaitat Kakak Fixes Dadeswat Moso Kaklaptu Kumtu Hai Timkat Chokaknyanvat Fumiko Hanako Tomoko Dr. Patterson Colonel Harrison. Clarify Red Cross hearing timeline 4. Expand Red Cross hearing scene, make more dramatic. Add Mrs. O'Brien closure. Add Emiko's mother-sister resolution 7. Remove duplicate save baby lines 8. Fix any remaining repetitions. Toi Se Viet Lai. Part 3 Huanxing Batukaka Fixes Ne. The Enemy's Baby. Part 3 revised. Final December 7th, 1945. Evening, Dr. Carter sat in his office preparing documents for the Red Cross hearing the next morning. Charts documenting every aspect of Emiko's care. Vitamin logs, weight measurements, blood pressure readings, evidence that he'd done nothing wrong, nothing inappropriate, just medicine, just his job. The phone rang, long distance. The operator's voice crackled through static. Michigan calling for Dr. William Carter. His hand trembled as he picked up the receiver. Eleanor, his wife. Her voice was shaking in a way he'd never heard before. Not in 30 years of marriage. Not even when he'd shipped out to France in 1917. Bill, it's Sarah. Her blood pressure spiked this afternoon. Severe preeclampsia. She's in the hospital. They might have to do emergency cesarean. When he asked, his own voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Tomorrow morning. Maybe earlier if things get worse. Can you come? The question hung in the air between them. 1,000 miles of telephone wire carrying impossible weight. Because tomorrow morning, Emiko was scheduled for the external cephalic version. The procedure to turn the baby. The one chance to save them both. Dr. Carter had finally gotten provisional approval from the Red Cross investigator. Weber had indicated he would likely overrule Colonel Harrison. Say denying necessary medical care would constitute a war crime under Geneva Convention Article 15. Tomorrow morning was when everything happened. Sarah or Emiko, his daughter or the enemy's baby. He couldn't be in two places at once. Eleanor, he said slowly, I have a patient here. Pregnant Japanese woman. Baby's breech. If I don't try to turn it tomorrow, she could die in labor. She and the baby both. Silence on the line. Then Eleanor's voice quieter now. Your patient or your daughter, Bill. You have to choose. The words hit him like bullets. Your patient or your daughter. As if it were that simple. As if there were a right answer. I found Sarah's diary, Eleanor said suddenly, last week when I was helping her pack for the hospital. She'd been writing in it every day. Her last entry she wrote about that Japanese woman you told her about in your letters. What did she say? Eleanor's voice broke. She said if I don't make it, promise me Dad will save hers. That baby is innocent. All babies are innocent. Show her what American mercy really means. Dr. Carter closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face. Silent. Hot. Sarah wrote that Eleanor continued because she knows you. She knows you try to get to her. She knows you'd feel guilty. She's giving you permission to stay. To keep your promise. To be the doctor she's always been proud of. But she's my daughter, Carter whispered. And I'm her mother, Eleanor said. I'll be with her. She'll have doctors. Good doctors. But that Japanese woman only has you. Stay. Do your job. Sarah would want that. The line went quiet except for the crackle of distance. I love you, Carter said. I know. Eleanor's voice was steady now. Resigned. Save them both if you can, but save the one in front of you. That's all any of us can do. The line went dead. Dr. Carter sat in the darkness of his office. His daughter was dying in Michigan. And tomorrow morning he would be in Wisconsin trying to save a stranger's baby. He thought about duty, about oaths, about promises made to daughters and promises made to patients. He thought about Sarah, 28 years old, nurse, kind soul, always helping others. Even now, even facing death, she was thinking about someone else, about a Japanese woman she'd never met, about mercy being more important than blood. He would stay. He would keep the promise, even if it cost him everything. December 8th, 6 in the morning. The sky was still dark. Winter in Wisconsin. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache. Emiko lay on the examination table. Hanako held her hand. Miyuki stood at her feet. Tomoko and Keiko flanked the table. Yumiko waited by the door. They'd all insisted on being present. Whatever happened, they would face it together. Dr. Carter entered. His eyes were red. He hadn't slept. Nurse Margaret followed with Dr. Patterson. Rodriguez stood ready to translate. This will hurt, Carter said through Rodriguez. I'm sorry, we don't have anesthesia for this, but it's the only chance, Emiko nodded. Do it. Save my baby. Carter's hands pressed on her belly, firm, professional, trying to feel the baby's position through skin and muscle and fluid, finding the head at the top, the bottom presenting for birth. All wrong, he began to push, manipulating from outside, trying to rotate the baby clockwise. Turn it, flip it, get it head down. Emiko screamed. The pain was blinding, like her belly was being torn apart from inside. Carter pushed harder. The baby had to turn, had to. Margaret monitored the fetal heartbeat. Still strong, 140. Good. Carter repositioned his hands, pushed from a different angle. Emiko's scream became a wail. Hanako was crying, Miyuki too, but they held on. Almost there, Carter muttered. Almost. Then everything went wrong. Carter stopped. His face went white. Bleeding, he said. She's bleeding internally. Margaret lifted the sheet. Blood. Too much blood. Placental abruption, she said urgently. The placenta's separating from the uterine wall. When the placenta separates, the baby loses oxygen. Minutes to death. And the mother hemorrhages. D's from blood loss. Carter made a decision in seconds. Get her to surgery, now. Baby needs to come out now or they both die. They moved fast, wheeled the table through corridors, into the makeshift operating theater, a converted examination room. Not equipped for major surgery, but it would have to do. Rodriguez ran to get Colonel Harrison, required protocol for emergency procedures on POWs, but there was no time to wait for approval. We're doing this, Carter said. Prep her. Now. 7:23 in the morning. Carter scrubbed. Margaret prepared instruments. Dr. Patterson readied himself to receive the baby. The women stood outside the operating room, praying. To Buddha, to God, to anyone listening. Inside, Carter stood over Emiko, scalpel in hand. This was it. The moment. Emergency cesarean with minimal anesthesia. Basic equipment. A prison camp operating room. If he failed, 2 people died. If he succeeded, he'd have saved an enemy's baby while his daughter died. He thought of Sarah, imagined her in a hospital in Michigan, going through the same thing, doctors working to save her baby. He prayed they would succeed where he might fail. Emiko, he said through Rodriguez, I'm going to cut you open and take the baby out. It will hurt terribly, but it's the only way. Do you understand? Through pain and fear, Emiko whispered in Japanese. Save the baby. You both matter, Carter said. I'm saving you both. 7:28. Morphine injection. Not enough to eliminate pain. Only to dull it. Local anesthetic at the incision site. Limited supply. Margaret gave Emiko a leather strap. Bite down on this. 7:31. The incision. Horizontal, low, and transverse. Carter's hands were steady despite everything. Despite the grief. Despite the exhaustion. Despite knowing his daughter was dying while he worked. Scalpel through skin, through fascia, through muscle, each layer deliberate, precise. Emiko screamed despite the morphine, bit down so hard the leather split. Hanako had convinced them to let her assist. She stood across from Carter, watching his technique, seeing the skill, the care. This was a man who'd done this many times, who knew exactly what he was doing. Blood pooled. Margaret suctioned, maintained the field. Carter worked deeper, through the final layer, into the uterus. 7:35. I see the baby, Carter said. Breach confirmed. Feet first. Going in. He reached inside, grasped tiny feet, pulled gently. The baby was stuck, shoulders wedged. Carter maneuvered, rotated. Come on, little one, help me out. Margaret's voice was tight. Doctor, she's bleeding more, a lot more, I know, almost there. He pulled again, felt the baby shift, slide, emerge. 7:37. The baby came out, small, covered in blood and vernix, blue, silent. Carter clamped the cord, cut it, handed the baby to Patterson. Warm her up, stimulate. And he turned back to Emiko, still bleeding, heavily. Patterson worked frantically. Rubbed the baby with a towel, suctioned the airway. Nothing. The baby wasn't breathing. She's not breathing, he called out. Keep trying. Carter ordered without looking up. He was elbow deep in Emiko's abdomen, finding the bleeding vessel, suturing fast. Come on, contract. The uterus needed to contract to stop the bleeding. He massaged it externally. Patterson kept rubbing, suctioning, calling to the baby. Breathe, please breathe. Outside the operating room, the women heard silence. No baby crying. Terror seized them. Tomoko collapsed to her knees. Miyuki covered her mouth to muffle her sobs. 7:38. Inside, Patterson was losing hope. Doctor, I don't think she's going to make it. Don't stop, Carter growled. Don't you dare stop. And then, a tiny gasp, barely audible. Then another. And then the wail, loud, angry, alive. The most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. Patterson laughed, a sound of pure relief. She's breathing. She's alive. Outside, the women heard the cry. They collapsed into each other, weeping, laughing, thanking gods and ancestors and fate. But inside, the crisis wasn't over. 7:39. Emiko's blood pressure was dropping. The uterus still wasn't contracting properly. Carter called for oxytocin, injected it directly, massaged harder. Contract. Please contract. Emiko was barely conscious, pale from blood loss, but she whispered. Baby alive, Hanako said from across the table. Girl, crying, alive. Emiko smiled, then closed her eyes. Carter worked for another 15 minutes, suturing, repairing, fighting for every second of Emiko's life. Finally, the bleeding slowed, stopped. Blood pressure stabilized. She would live. 7:52, crisis over, both alive, mother and baby, against impossible odds. Carter sutured the layers closed. Careful, precise, even now, even exhausted, even grieving. She would scar, but she would live. The baby cleaned and wrapped was placed in Emiko's arms. 5 pounds, 3 ounces, small but healthy, pink now, breathing well, eyes closed. Perfect. Dr. Carter stepped back, pulled off his gloves, and that's when he saw Colonel Harrison in the doorway, with a telegram in his hand. The expression on Harrison's face told Carter everything he needed to know. Your wife called the base operator, Harrison said quietly. I'm sorry. Doctor, your daughter didn't make it. Emergency cesarean at 8:15 Michigan time. The baby survived. A boy. But Sarah died from hemorrhaging. The room went silent. Even the baby stopped fussing for a moment. Dr. Carter stood there, covered in Emiko's blood, having just saved her life, having just delivered her baby, while his own daughter died. Same cause, same complication. One lived, one died, and he'd chosen to be here. Hanako understood enough English. She saw Carter's face crumble, saw the grief hit him like a physical blow. She moved around the table, stood beside him, put her hand on his arm. Your daughter, she asked in broken English. Carter nodded, couldn't speak. The baby boy, alive. Hanako's eyes filled with tears. I am so sorry. Dr. Carter looked at Emiko, at the baby in her arms, at the life he'd saved. Did I make the right choice, he asked, not expecting an answer, just asking the universe. The what? Hanako spoke carefully, choosing English words she knew. Your daughter had many doctors. Emiko had only you. You saved the one you could save. That is calling of doctors. She paused, then added, your daughter was nurse. She understood. She would be proud. Carter broke then, turned away from the table, shoulders shaking. Silent sobs that tore through him. Margaret moved to take over post-operative care. Dr. Patterson left the room quickly, uncomfortable with raw grief. But Hanako stayed, this enemy nurse, standing with an enemy doctor, both understanding loss, both understanding the impossible choices war forces on good people. Thank you, Carter finally whispered, for helping, for being here. You saved my friend, Hanako said. You saved innocent baby. That is what medicine means. Later that afternoon, when Emiko was stable and resting, the women gathered in her hospital room. The baby lay in a simple crib beside the bed, sleeping, unaware of the drama surrounding her birth, unaware that a girl in Michigan had died so she could live, unaware of anything except warmth and safety. What will you name her, Miyuki asked. Emiko looked at the baby for a long time. Haruka, she said finally. It means distant or far away. Distant hope. Hope for a future far from here, far from war. Hope that someday babies won't be born like this. It's beautiful, Tomoko said. Hanako added, Dr. Carter's daughter's name was Sarah, maybe middle name. To honor her, Emiko nodded. Haruka Sarah, Japanese and American, both, because she is both now. The naming ceremony was informal, held in the hospital room 3 days later. The women gathered, each offered a blessing. Hanako blessed health and wisdom. Miyuki blessed curiosity and learning. Tomoko blessed love. Keiko blessed gentle hands. Fumiko came last. She'd been avoiding everyone since the confrontation about the letter. But she came to the naming, knelt beside the bed. May she forgive us for the world we gave her, Fumiko whispered. May she learn mercy where we learned only hatred. The American staff came too. Margaret blessed safety and warmth. Dr. Patterson blessed strength and resilience. And Dr. Carter, eyes still red with grief, blessed simply life, long and full, like my daughter wanted for her. Danny O'Brien brought a package from his mother. He'd written to her about the baby's birth, about the emergency surgery, about Dr. Carter's daughter. Mrs. O'Brien, the Gold Star mother who'd lost her son at Iwo Jima, had sent hand-knitted baby clothes, tiny socks, a blanket, a hat. The note was long. Rodriguez translated it for everyone. Dear Emiko and baby Haruka, I knitted these clothes when my Danny wrote to tell me about you. My son died at Iwo Jima, killed by Japanese soldiers. For 2 years, I hated all Japanese people, hated them for taking my boy. But when I heard about you, about your baby, about Dr. Carter's sacrifice, I understood something. War makes us hate strangers. Peace means making strangers into family. This baby is innocent, just like my grandson is innocent, just like Dr. Carter's grandson is innocent. They didn't start the war. They shouldn't pay for it. These clothes are made with love, not pity, love. Because you are my grandniece in spirit, if not in blood. You are proof that peace is possible. Live well, love much, and remember that compassion requires more courage than combat. With love, Mary O'Brien, Gold Star Mother, December 10, 1945. Emiko wept holding those clothes, an American grandmother who'd lost her son to Japanese soldiers, knitting for a Japanese baby, because she understood that babies are innocent, that punishing children for their parents' wars is monstrous, that mercy is the only thing that breaks the cycle of hatred. The Red Cross hearing postponed when Dr. Carter's emergency surgery took precedence over paperwork reconvened on December 10th. Mr. Weber had witnessed the surgery from the doorway, had seen Dr. Carter's hands save 2 lives while his own daughter died. That changed everything. The hearing room was tense. Colonel Harrison sat with his evidence. Extra rations, special treatment time spent on a single prisoner. All documented, all seemingly damning. Weber listened to Harrison's presentation, then asked to hear from the prisoner herself. Emiko stood still, recovering from surgery, Haruka in her arms. Through Rodriguez, she spoke. Dr. Carter saved my baby. He saved me. While his own daughter died. Same morning, same complication. He chose to stay here, with enemy prisoner, because that is his calling. She paused, then continued. In Japan, I would have been shamed. Baby would have been burdened. We would have died and no one would have cared. Here, American doctor cared. American nurse cared. American guard brought gifts. They didn't see enemy. They saw mother and baby who needed help. Weber made notes, then asked Harrison, Colonel, if we deny necessary medical care to prisoners and they die. What does that make us? Harrison had no answer. Weber's report was unequivocal. Dr. Carter didn't just meet Geneva Convention standards. He demonstrated what those standards were created to protect the fundamental dignity of all human beings, even in war. To punish him for this would be to abandon the very values we claim to fight for. Not only is Dr. Carter cleared of all charges, his conduct should be held as the example of how medical professionals should treat all patients, regardless of nationality. Harrison signed the report, said nothing, but something in his face had changed. He looked at Dr. Carter differently now. Respect where there had been irritation. The hearing concluded on December 15th with a report that praised rather than condemned. Fumiko was devastated. Her complaint had almost gotten Emiko killed. She knelt before Emiko's hospital bed. Forgive me, I was wrong. I almost killed your baby for pride, for a concept of honor that values death over life. Emiko took Fumiko's hand. Help me now. Help me raise Haruka. Teach her about Japan, about our culture, but also teach her about what you learned here. That mercy matters. That's how you make it right. Fumiko nodded, crying, and from that day she became Haruka's fiercest protector. In February 1946, repatriation orders came. Ships were being prepared to return Japanese POWs to Japan. The women of Camp McCoy would leave within 60 days. But Dr. Carter called Emiko to his office. made an offer that would change everything. "You don't have to go back," he said through Rodriguez. "You can apply for refugee status. Stay in America." Haruka was born here. There's legal precedent for children born in POW camps to claim citizenship. "Why?" Emiko asked. "Why you helped so much?" Carter looked at the photo on his desk. His grandson, Sarah's son, being raised by him and Eleanor now. "Because you remind me of my daughter. Young, scared, pregnant, needing help. I couldn't save her. But I can help you," he continued. "My wife and I are sponsoring refugees. We can help you get citizenship, find work, build a life. Haruka will face prejudice. Yes, she's Japanese in America, but she'll have food, medicine, education, opportunities. And she won't be called child of the enemy. What about my family in Japan? Send for them later if they want to come or visit, but you and Haruka can be safe here." Emiko had 6 weeks to decide. She talked to her friends, prayed, thought about Haruka's future. In Japan, starvation shame a tainted child of the enemy. In America, safety prejudice, but hope. 4 other women chose to stay too. Miyuki, Tomoko, Keiko, Yumiko. They would build a small community, support each other, navigate this strange new world together. Fumiko chose to return to Japan, but transformed, determined to tell the truth about American mercy, about how enemies became family. She promised to check on Emiko's family in Osaka, to tell them Emiko and Haruka were safe. Hanako returned first to check on her own family, then came back to America 6 months later. The pull of this new understanding was too strong. The evidence that another way was possible. January 20th, 1946. Emiko announced her decision. "I stay. For Haruka, I choose her future over my past." Dr. Carter helped her through the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the interviews. By March, Emiko and the others were released from POW status, moved to transitional housing in Milwaukee, started learning English properly, started building new lives. Eleanor Carter welcomed them, not with pity, with genuine warmth. "My husband saved you," she said through a translator. "My daughter blessed it. Your family now." She taught Emiko English, helped with childcare, became grandmother to Haruka in Sarah's place. It was healing for everyone. 6 months after Emiko chose to stay, a letter arrived from Osaka. Her mother's handwriting, stronger now than in previous letters. The sister had recovered, barely. Survived the starvation winter with help from money Fumiko had brought from Emiko's camp wages. The family had survived. And her mother wrote, "I understand why you stayed. I would have made the same choice. Haruka's life matters more than our pride. Come visit when you can, but live where she can thrive." That is what mothers do. They never reunited in person. Emiko's mother died in 1952, her health never fully recovering from the war years. But they exchanged letters every month for 6 years, forgiveness given, love maintained across an ocean. And in 1950, Emiko's sister came to America. Healthy, grateful. She lived with Emiko for 2 years before marrying a Japanese-American veteran. The years passed. Emiko married a Japanese-American man in 1949, had 2 more children, raised Haruka with both cultures, Japanese language and customs at home, American citizenship and education in the world. Haruka grew up knowing her story, knowing she'd been born in a prison camp, that an American doctor had saved her while his daughter died. That mercy from enemies had given her life. She grew up wanting to be a doctor. December 1965, 20 years after Haruka's birth, a gathering at the Carter home in Wisconsin. Dr. Carter was 72 now, still practicing. Eleanor was 70, still teaching English to new immigrants. Emiko arrived with her family. Haruka, 20 years old, was in her 2nd year of pre-med at University of Wisconsin. Brilliant student, determined. She'd grown up beautiful, confident, perfectly balanced between 2 cultures. Sarah's son was there too, William Carter III, 20 years old, studying to be a doctor like his grandfather. He and Haruka had grown up like cousins, writing letters, visiting summers. They stood together now, same age, same dreams, connected by tragedy and mercy. Danny O'Brien came from Boston, 39 now, married, 3 kids, still writing to Emiko every Christmas, still sending gifts for Haruka's birthday. He brought something else, too, a letter from his mother. Mrs. O'Brien was 81 now, too frail to travel, but she'd written to Haruka, "Dear Haruka, I knitted your first clothes when you were just a promise of hope. You are my grandniece in spirit, if not in blood. You are proof that peace is possible. Live well, love much, and remember that compassion requires more courage than combat. With love, Grandma O'Brien." Haruka kept that letter in her wallet for 50 years. Margaret Sullivan came from California, retired from nursing, but never forgot her favorite delivery. Miyuki was there, professor now, teaching comparative literature. Tomoko had married a Japanese-American veteran who'd served as a translator. They'd opened a restaurant together in 1940. It became a gathering place for mixed families, a place where former enemies shared meals and became neighbors. Keiko ran a successful tailoring business. All thriving, all American, all remembering. The stories continued late into the night around the dinner table. American food and Japanese food mixed together. Turkey and sushi, apple pie and mochi, cultures blending, enemies becoming family. Someone asked about those who couldn't be there. Fumiko had returned to Japan in 1946, carrying letters from all of them. She'd found Emiko's family, helped them survive with money and goods. Fumiko spent 30 years teaching in Tokyo, telling students about the American camp where enemies chose mercy. She never married, dedicated her life to preventing the next war through education and truth. She died in 1979, the day after writing her last letter to Haruka. In it, she wrote, "I was wrong about everything except one thing. You were always worth saving." Colonel Harrison had retired in 1950, never quite comfortable with how the Emiko situation had resolved. He'd followed the rules, done his duty as he understood it. But in 1963, he'd sent to Carter a brief note. "You were right. I was following rules. You were following conscience. History will remember which mattered more." Dr. Patterson, the young red-haired intern, became an obstetrician. He delivered over 3,000 babies in his career. In every difficult delivery, he thought of that morning in December, when a Japanese baby taught him what it meant to fight for life. He wrote to Dr. Carter every year on December 8th, gratitude for being allowed to witness true medicine. And Hanako had become a nurse at the same Milwaukee hospital where Emiko eventually worked. She married an American doctor in 1952. Together they opened a clinic serving Japanese-American communities. She died in 1998, surrounded by the families she'd helped bring into the world. They gathered around the dinner table. Dr. Carter in center, holding infant Emiko's youngest. Emiko and husband on left. Haruka on right arm, around William Carter III. Others gathered around chosen family. Haruka stood to speak. Her English was perfect, unaccented, American. "I was born in a war," she said, "but I was raised in peace because people chose mercy over hatred, because my mother chose hope over fear, because Dr. Carter chose to honor his calling, not abandon it, and because his daughter Sarah blessed it all." She looked at Dr. Carter, at the old man who'd saved her life. "You didn't choose one over the other that day," she said. "You chose to honor your daughter by being exactly who she knew you were, a healer who saves the patient in front of him." She would be proud. Dr. Carter, tears streaming, raised his glass. "To Sarah, who taught me that saving one life is worth everything. To Emiko, who survived impossible odds. To Haruka, who proved that the children of enemies can become family. And to Mercy, the only weapon that truly ends wars." They drank, they ate, they told stories late into the night, about prison camps and surgeries and letters from Gold Star mothers, about the moment when kindness broke through hatred, about choosing to see humanity instead of nationality. And in that room for those hours, the war truly ended, not with treaties or surrenders, but with forgiveness, with chosen family, with proof that another way was possible. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. That was different. That was World War II. Things were simpler then. But were they? Dr. Carter saved a Japanese baby while his daughter died. Danny O'Brien, whose brother was killed at Iwo Jima, brought gifts for an enemy child. Mrs. O'Brien, a Gold Star mother, knitted clothes for the baby of the people who killed her son. These weren't easy choices. These weren't simple times. These were the hardest choices imaginable. But they made them anyway, because they understood something we're in danger of forgetting. Showing compassion requires more courage than showing hate. You who are watching this, You who served, who fought, who know what war really costs. You know this truth better than anyone. The enemy soldier is just another person who was told to fight. And the real victory isn't destroying them. It's showing them there's a better way. That's what Dr. Carter did. That's what Emiko learned, and that's what Haruka represents. Proof that mercy works. Dr. William Carter died in 1978 at age 85. Emiko died in 2003 at age 82. But Haruka is still alive, still a doctor, still telling this story, still reminding people that we're all human, all of us. Japanese, American, German, Iraqi, Afghan. Doesn't matter. Strip away the uniforms, the flags, the propaganda, and we're all just people trying to survive, trying to protect our children, trying to find mercy in a world of hatred. This story isn't just about World War II. It's about every war, every conflict, every time we're told to hate someone we've never met. It's about choosing to see humanity instead. That's the American way, the real American way, not the propaganda, not the slogans, the values, the mercy, the belief that all people are created equal and that even our enemies deserve dignity. Share this story with your children, your grandchildren. Tell them about Dr. Carter, about Emiko, about baby Haruka. Remind them that America's greatest weapon was never our bombs. It was always our values. And if we lose those values, if we forget that those we once fought can become those we cherish, if we forget that compassion matters, then we've lost what makes us American. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Stories that remind us who we are, who we can be. Leave a comment. Tell us your story, your experience with mercy, because we're all writing this story together. The story of what it means to be human, what it means to choose mercy. Always, thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering, and thank you for choosing mercy in a world that desperately needs it, now more than ever.